Salvete discipuli. So we finished the fifth declension, but before we move on to adjectives, we do have a few other new words to learn that belong to the declensions you've already seen. And there is something a little different about these words. These are nouns with special meanings in the plural. And so there are a couple of different categories of these. So we are going to be learning these new words. They're going to follow all the same rules and all the same endings. So there's no new endings to learn, but you'll see what's a little different about these words. Some Latin nouns are used mainly in the plural, but with a singular meaning. And so these are two examples. Castra, castrorum. It means camp. Now, the first thing you're probably noticing is the dictionary form, and you're saying, this does not look like a dictionary form I've seen. You see castra, castre, right? Just like you saw terra, terre, or, or porta, porte. But now you're seeing aurum. Well, the reason for that is the following. Typically, the dictionary form is the nominative singular and then the genitive singular. But this says some Latin nouns are used mainly in the plural, but with a singular meaning. So what we have here is castra, castrorum, which really means that this is not a first declension word. This is a second declension neuter word, right? It's just that we don't say castrum. It's just not used in the singular. Some Latin nouns are used mainly in the plural. So let's finish this. Aurum, castris, it'd have to be castra again. Castra, castris. So this is the entire declension of that word, castra, castrorum. And it means the camp. And so what's a little different about this is if you wanted to say in the camp, you would have to say, like if something happened in the camp, not into the camp, we're just talking about regular old in with the ablative. This is still the ablative down here, but you would say in castris. In castris means in the camp. So if you wanted to say Caesar is in the camp, you would say Caesar est in castris, or Caesar in castris est. It sounds like you're saying Caesar is in the somethings, but it means Caesar is in the camp. That's how we say it in English. It's just that in Latin they kind of thought of the camp as being a plural. So maybe like each little unit of the camp being a castrum, but they never said the word castrum. They always just called them collectively, castra, right? They would call them collectively just all of the castra. And if you were ever saying of the camp, it'd be castrorum, of all those castra, right? Or if you're in the camp, in castris. So again, no new words, no new endings to memorize. Just kind of a new concept here. And there's one other word that the book gave like that, impedimenta, impedimentorum. So again, it's an A with an aurum. So this is another second declension neuter word, impedimenta, impedimentorum. And it means the baggage, or it means the baggage train. What does it mean by baggage train? Like like if you're an army on the march, that's kind of like what a train was. You think of a train as being like a steam engine, which of course they didn't have, but the word train did exist. It's just a long row of something that's being transported, that's moving. So a train always had that meaning, even before trains, how you think of them, were invented. So let's do that. Impedimenta, impedimentorum. So again, we're doing nothing on the singular side. Impedimenta, and you can see why it might be called that. It's kind of weighing you down if you've got a lot of baggage. It's kind of like an impediment, right? So impedimenta, impedimentorum. Impedimentis, impedimenta again, impedimentis. And so if you ever wanted to say of the baggage train or of the baggage, impedimentorum. And so we tend to, and both of these you can kind of use your imagination and imagine why they would use plurals for these particular things. A camp is made up of multiple, campsites, or tents or whatever, little partitions, of the camp. Especially if you look at a Roman camp. And of course, baggage is made of multiple pieces as well. And so that makes perfect sense. So these were not the only types of words that had special meanings in the plural. Let's look at the next section down as well. It says some Latin nouns have different meanings in the singular and the plural. So for certain words, we're going to decline them all the way, but on the singular side, it's going to have one meaning, and on the plural side, it's going to have a different meaning. And so let's take a look at our first one. And then hopefully these are going down in your notes as well. Okay, the first one is gratia gratiae and gratiae gratiarum. So it's giving you a separate set of the dictionary forms, kind of like it did up here, using the nominative plural and the genitive plural, because everything on that plural side is going to have a different meaning. So gratia gratiae, or gratia gratiae, excuse my terrible classical pronunciation. Gratia gratiae. So this is going to have the meaning favor, influence, or grace if we're talking about Christian Latin. So favor, influence, or grace. But on the plural side, where we have gratiae gratiarum, all of these are going to have the meaning of thanks. And of course, this is where we get the word gracias from in Spanish, or grazie in Italian. Grazie, by the way, in Italian, that is a plural, just like these, and gracias. That's why we don't say gracia in Spanish, right? We say gracias, they're plurals, because the thanks was plural in Latin. Okay, so let's finish declining this. This is just a first declension word. There's nothing weird about this. I, gratiae, gratiam, gratia with a macron. Don't forget your macron. I, arum, gratis, gratias, gratis. Now you are a classicist. All right. Now, this is going to take some careful reading as well. It says learn also agunt or adjunt, which means they give. Now, we're going to use this word with the word gratias, right? Because This word doesn't really mean they give. It means they do or they render. And so in English we say give thanks, but in Latin you're kind of like doing thanks or you're rendering thanks. And so we're going to say that adjunt means they give. See the nt, that's the they part of it. We're going to say that adjunt means they give only when it's used with the word gratias. Now, why are we choosing the word gratias out of all of these words on the chart? Well, because these ones over here, they all mean favor, influence, or grace. I suppose you could say God gives gratiam, right? But we're going to do gratias because if you give thanks, you're verbing thanks, and we need the accusative. So that's why we're picking on the word gratias when we see that in the vocab list here. Okay, and so the way to say thank you in Latin would be gratias to you. There's a special way to say to you, tibi, that means to you, and then and if we take agunt and we just put an O on the end instead, ago, that means thanks I give to you. That's basically the long form way to say thanks in Latin. Gratias tibi ago. So means thank you. But if we're saying God gives grace to Mary, okay, and I'm making these sentences up. These are not coming from an exercise right now. So it'd be Deus, God gives thanks to Mary. Now, how would we do to Mary? We would do Mariae. We would use the dative, right? Mariae gives thanks. Well, if he's giving grace, not thanks, giving grace. Well, the grace side is the singular side, and if he's giving it, we need the accusative, right? And so we would say gratiam, God to Mary grace gives. And then we would say we wouldn't say agunt because God's not plural, he's one. So we would do agit. So Deus Mariae gratiam agit. Let's take a look at the next one that works like this. Copia copiae. That means an abundance or a supply. But on the plural side, copiae copiarum, it means troops or forces. So they kind of have a similar meaning. But on this plural side, it's going to have more of a military meaning. And on the singular side, it's going to have more of just a generic, the meaning of supply or abundance of something. So that's copia copiae. So let's do that. Copia copiae. Copiae copiarum. Let's finish filling it out. Copiae, copiam, copia with a macron, copiis, copias, and then copies. So over here it means a supply or an abundance. Over here it means troops, supply of more troops or an abundance of more soldiers, or forces. And so we're going to do some, let's just do an example of each, just one that I make up here. So there was an abundance of something. What do you think we're going to use with to say an abundance of something? We're never just going to say there's an abundance because you're always going to be like, well, an abundance of what? There's an abundance of something. Like, ooh, of swords. Ooh, that would be good. Okay, so let's say there's an abundance of swords in the river. Why not? Okay, so there is. How do you say there is? That's an expletive, right? Est. So est. So there is a supply. So if it's a supply, I want to use something from the singular side. And if there is something, then it's just a nominative. So est copia. There is a supply. Est copia of swords. Gladius. So gladi is my stem. How would we say of swords? You can kind of just use this chart right here, couldn't you? Just pretend it's so of swords. And even though sword is a second declension word and this is a first declension word that's declined here, you can kind of just envision it. So gladius, right, would go here. Gladius of swords. We want genitive, plural. And here it says arum, but we know that if it's second declension, we just do aurum. So gladiorum. So there is a supply of swords in the river. In, and we need an ablative here. What is our word for river? Flumen, fluminous, right? Flumen, fluminous. I don't want to put flumen because I don't need the nominative. I want to put flumin because that's our stem for the rest of the endings. Influmine, influmine. Est copia gladiorum influmine. So there is a supply of swords in the river. Let's say there are the forces of the Gauls entered the camp. And then we'll use camp from our last one. So the forces of the Gauls. So copiae would be the forces. So the copiae of the Gauls. So how do we say Gaul? Not the place Gaul, not that's Gallia, Galliae. That's the place called Gaul. What about the Gauls, the people? That's Gallus, Galli. So I'm going to write my stem, Gal, and so we have the troops of the Gauls, or the forces of the Gauls. So Gallorum. Let's see. Let's say they made an attack upon the camp of the Romans. Ooh, that would be good. Okay, so they made an attack upon the camp of the Romans. So if they made an attack, what's that attack? Metus, right? Metus. So we're going to say metum because they made an attack. Metum. They made is fecerunt, but we're going to save that for the end. So the troops or the forces of the Gauls an attack upon the camp. So we're going to use in with the accusative to say this. So in and there was something weird about camp. Oh, we're only going to use the plural side. So we're going to use in plus the accusative. So we're going to say in castra. Okay? Because castra is an accusative because it's a neuter word. So we're going to say in castra. In castra. Now, if something were happening in the camp, then we would say in castres. We'd be using the ablative, right? But here we're saying upon the camp. So we're using the accusative in castra. Copiae Gallorum metum in castra. We want to say upon the camp of the Romans, and then we'll put our fecerunt. I'll do the fecerunt right now. Of the Romans. The Romanorum. Copiae gallorum metum in castra Romanorum fecerunt. All right. I think in the next video is where we will do our couple of sentences, just so that this one doesn't get too long, and that one will be a nice short video. All right. Valete.